Today's episode of the What's on Stage podcast is sponsored by Go Live Theatre. Every one of us who cares about theatre cares about making sure it is open to everyone. Go Live Theatre is an amazing charity that gives thousands of children and young people who would ordinarily be excluded from the joy, power and benefits that live theatre can bring the opportunity to experience a performance, often for the first time. It works with youngsters from disadvantaged backgrounds and with special educational needs or disabilities. It offers a chance to see shows to families who think theatre just isn't open to them. Since its formation in 1997, it's taken over 250,000 children to the theatre. It's a brilliant and inspiring organisation. If you want to find out more and show your support, please visit www.golivetheatre.org.uk. Hello and welcome to this week's special edition of the What's on Stage podcast. I'm Sarah Crompton and I'm very, very pleased to have with me this week as my special guest Sir Tim Rice, who is a legendary writer of musicals, lyricist extraordinaire, rare holder of an EGOT, which means he's won Emmys, Grammys, Oscars and Tonys, one of only 15 people to hold that award, and about to go out on tour with his live show, My Life in Musicals, I Know Him So Well, which has just added another 33 performances, I think, to its tour dates, Tim. It's a brilliant idea that you're going out on stage to talk about your life in musicals and otherwise. How you did it last year, didn't you? What's tempted you back out on the road again?
Well, it was really the producers, because last year was a little bit of an experiment and it went really well. And the producers said, let's do it again. And like a fool, I said, oh, all right. And so we're going again. And this time, we're doing Scotland and Ireland and Wales, as well as England, which is all I did last time. I mean, we did 22 dates, but they were all in England. And I said, well, if we ever do it again, I wouldn't mind going up to Scotland, which I know well as a country. And I'd love to go to Ireland with it and Wales. And they agreed and lumbered me with 33 dates all over British Isles.
Stars now for the 11th. What do you like about it? Because you've always been behind the scenes to some extent. So what do you like about being on the stage?
Well, I suppose I'm a frustrated performer. But
we all are.
I think I've found over the years that people are genuinely, particularly musicals fans, are very keen to find out how things are put together, what it's like working with distinguished composers and great performers. And I'm moderately good at explaining all this, or at least giving my views on it. I'm not sure I'm right all the time. But if you intersperse a bit of chat from me, revealing all behind the scenes and all that, with great performers singing some of the songs from the shows I've been involved with, then people seem to like it. And there were, I suppose I probably do about 20 songs. I don't do them. Don't panic. I do sing a tiny bit, to illustrate one or two rather bad early songs. But I've got 4 really good West End singers, 2 guys, 2 girls, a nice tight band, tight in the sense of playing together rather than paralytically drunk. And they're under the command of a very, very well-known West End musical director, Duncan Waugh. And we get through about 20 songs in 2 hours. And I would say if you're a fan of musicals, and I assume most people who come to this sort of show would be basically musicals fans, you probably know 14 or 15 of the songs. If you're a real nut, you'd know the lot. But in addition to all the obvious ones, like Don't Cry For Me, Argentina, Whole New World, Hakuna Matata, whatever, Any Dream Will Do, in addition to all those songs, which people, I'm delighted to say, seem to enjoy, we throw in 1 or 2 lesser-known ones. There's a song I did with Andrew Lloyd Webber for Elvis Presley. There's 1 or 2 flops. There's a new song I wrote with Gary Barlow recently. So there's a little bit of variety. But basically, if I go to a show by a great artist, or even by a not-so-great artist, I want to hear the songs I know and love. You can hear 1 or 2 songs that you don't know, because especially if they're good. But the dreaded moment, and lots of artists say this, against themselves. They say the dreaded moment when I say, and now some songs from my new album, and people go, oh.
Yeah.
They want to hear the greatest hits, and basically that's what we give them.
And I mean, as I said in the introduction, your greatest hits come from such a wide range of musicals. I mean, you redefine the musical with Andrew Lloyd Webber in the 70s with shows like Jesus Christ Superstar and Evita. But then you go on to Chess and all the Disney shows, Lion King, Aladdin, and so on. I mean, it has been, how do you feel when you look back on it? Is it the career that you expected to have when you started out as a 20-year-old, tried to write pop songs?
No, I don't think I had any idea what was going to happen. And looking back on it, I don't know how that happened. But I didn't really feel confident that this was going to be a lifetime career until probably Evita, because Superstar could have been a one-off fluke. And at that point, when Superstar took off, Joseph was very popular in schools, but it wasn't a big earner or anything. And it wasn't until Joseph really became a West End smash in the 90s, which was sometime after Evita had been a hit. So it wasn't really until 1978-9 when I thought, hang on, we're not one-hit wonders, we're two-hit wonders. Or possibly we might be three-hit wonders, but we're going to be around for a bit so we can keep going. And that was the moment. But I was still thinking, well, maybe I might have to go and get a proper job someday. But I think now I'm relaxed about it. I don't think I'll have to get a proper job.
I think you're allowed to be relaxed. I mean, one of the many things that you're doing this year, apart from the tour, there is a lot going on in your world. But one of the things is that Evita will be revived at the London Palladium.
Yeah. Yes.
How do you, I mean, that's obviously a revival with a lot riding on it because people like Jamie Lloyd's version of the show when it was at the Open Air Theatre. How do you feel about it coming back with Rachel Zegler and so on?
Well, I'm always happy when someone, with a good track record like Jamie, who did a wonderful version of it in the park, in Regent's Park in London about 4 or 5 years ago. I'm always very grateful, and one assumes, we must have given permission for this one. I'm sure somebody must have said, is it all right if Jamie Lloyd does the show? And I say, yeah, fine. So I'm sure it'll be a great production, but I'm not involved other than having written it. And that's all something that was done many, many moons ago. And providing they don't alter it violently or even at all, I'll be very happy to come along and see it.
Right. Have you been following Jamie Lloyd's versions of the shows? Did you see his Sunset Boulevard?
No, I haven't. I feel rather guilty about that. I never got around to it, and I was going to go and see it in New York, and I wasn't in New York at the right time. I think it's still on there, so I could still see it there.
You might manage it.
No, I ought to go. I don't go to the theatre very often, actually, partly because I don't live in London, and I just don't get round to it. I used to go an awful lot when I did live in town and when I was starting out in the theatre business. But I don't go that much now. I mean, funny enough, I've seen more things on Broadway than I have in London, because when I'm in New York for odds and sods, I think, I better go and see a couple of shows, and you always do. And then when I'm in London, I think, I can go anytime, and you don't.
Yeah, that is the great danger. I mean, I always say that's why I keep working as a theatre critic, because I know that if I didn't, I would just let them slide. It's that discipline.
Well, you must be... you obviously see far more shows than I do, so I should really be asking you what you think about theatre. And I saw, last time I was in New York, I saw a couple of shows, and one of them was really good, called Maybe Happy Ending, which was a show that emerged from Korea, of all places. And I thought it was really good. It's the best musical I've seen for ages, best new musical I've seen for 10 years, maybe.
Well, that's exciting. I should look out for that. And also, you have got the other big revival you've got this year is you're bringing Chess back to Broadway, and you are involved in that, aren't you?
Yes. I'll believe it when it happens. It seems to have been coming to Broadway for a long time, but I think it is going to happen at the very end of this year. And it was a disaster first time out. So,
why was it a disaster?
Well, I don't know. It's too long for starters. It went on for about 4 hours. There's a book added to it. It doesn't need a book, in my opinion. It's an opera. It's something that's romantic and dramatic, and you don't have to hear every word, but they're there. But I always feel that if you start explaining if you think, well, just to make sure that people get what this song is about, we'll have a bit of dialogue. And the more you explain, the more you have to explain, and it can get too long. There were some great performers. Judy Kuhn, in particular, was fantastic. So it wasn't the artist's fault; it was our fault, the producers. And I was a producer as much as a writer. And I thought, I'm not going to produce again. I'm rotten at it. And also, it's incredibly boring. You have to, I always remember when having produced Chests in London, which did okay in London. It was a hit there, but even then we had a lot of trouble. And I always remember one night somebody saying, the drummer is unable to get in tonight because there's been a flood in Hampstead or something. Totally genuine. And as a producer, I was the only one who happened to be around. I had to spend about an hour and a half trying to find another drummer. And I thought, if I was just the writer, I wouldn't have to do this. A producer has to be on hand every night in case of disaster, whereas a writer does most of the hard work before the show even opens.
I always get the feeling with Chess that it's you love it very much. I don't know if that's true, but when I've heard you talk about it before, I've always felt that it's the show that, in a sense, the show that got away. You have a great fondness for it.
Well, I think, yes, I do. I think there's an awful lot of good songs in it. It's not an obvious story that people can relate to without thinking like Evita or Superstar or Joseph, or for that matter, The Lion King, which it's not straightforward, but it's some of the music is just really knocks me sideways. And I listen to, particularly the original album was the best thing. And we did a concert tour of Chess in 1984, promoting the album with the original cast of Murray Head, Elaine Page, and Tommy Corberg. And the shows were great. And I thought, this is how Chess should be done. We shouldn't ever try and overstage it. And it's always overstaged. And it doesn't always work. But I'm hopeful that the Broadway version we've got some great people lined up for it. So I'm hopeful that will work. And
also, you're back writing with Andrew for a stage at the Birmingham Rep in December. Tell me about that.
Well, it's a very funny play, which in a way doesn't really need music. It's a very funny play written by Humphrey Carr and David Reed, who are two pretty well-known comedians and actors. Humphrey spends a lot of time in Los Angeles, where he works on several shows as a writer, but he's also, you recognize him if you saw it. I'm sure you would know him. He's very tall. He's about 6'8", literally. He and David wrote this very funny show called Sherlock Holmes and the 12 Days of Christmas. And I've known Humphrey for a while, and he said, why don't you would you like to write a couple of songs for the show, just to, give it a bit of a musical. It's a comedy. And it would work rather well. I said, yeah, okay. And then he said, well, who would you like to write the music? Actually, I think I said, who can I get to write the music? And he said, well, what about Andrew? I said, well, I could ask him. And I think partly because it was not a full mega commitment in terms of writing or producing, Andrew said, yes, we'd obviously want to make the songs good. And we've written 3 or 4 songs, which will, I don't want them to take away from the comedy of the show, which is very funny, but I think they'll add a little bit of spice, and most of the songs are meant to be funny as well. And they're lighthearted. Don't Cry for Me, Argentina is not in it. A song, but I think it'll do very well. It's opening in Birmingham over Christmas. And if it works, maybe we'll have a show that can come back every Christmas.
Was it nice to write with Andrew again, having had a bit of...
Yeah.
But the same way you've always worked?
Well, not really, because when we were working before, we were, in one or other's house, or grotty flat in the early days. And we would be doing a whole show. So it was a pretty time-consuming thing, and one wasn't doing much else. Now we're both doing a lot of other things, and it's only... it's an important contribution, and it's one we want to make as good as we can, but it's not really a full-time show. So, we've had a few get-togethers, a few phone calls. And of course you can do things like Zoom and all that these days, which you couldn't do back in the 60s. I'm not sure it's an improvement, by the way. I don't think, I'm far rather much happier with no email, no Zoom, nothing. The world was a much better place. But maybe we'll do another show together, or that we're both getting a little bit long in the tooth, but we might do, if I was doing a proper show with Andrew, then that would be a big-ish deal. It would take up a lot of time and one wouldn't do much else. But this is something I can do because we're only doing 3 or 4 songs for it, which I think would be great.
Am I right in thinking that with Andrew, the music tended to come first and then you'd write the lyrics?
Yeah.
And then with Elton John, it was the other way around, that he always wanted you to write the lyrics first and then he would fit the music. Is that, is that broadly right?
It's definitely right. Well, not a lot in a funny way. The key thing, though, before music or lyrics is the story. You've got to have the plot. You've got to have the scene. You've got to know what each song is going to be about. So the composer, or indeed the lyricist, knows that he or she is writing an argument or a love song or a lady addressing 10,000 people from a balcony, whatever it is, or you're writing a song for a warthog and a meerkat. So if the tune comes first, then the composer will know that, it's got to be Hakuna Matata rather than Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. If it's the lyricist writing first, usually, well, obviously, if it's my show, it's me, I've got to be happy with the basic storyline, which I will have probably been a key factor in working on. So certainly with Evita, when I drafted out the story, because nobody else knew the story, whereas Superstar to a certain extent, even though we were bringing Judas Iscariot into it, and it still had to be carefully constructed, the basic what was going to happen, most people knew.
Does writing the book also make a difference? Because again, you have had various points at which you've written the book and you haven't. How much do you get involved in the book when you're not technically the book writer?
Well, I've never really worked that often with a book. I don't, I'm trying to think now if I have. I mean, obviously Lion King.
Yeah, I think the Disney's.
Yes, the Disney stuff had a book. Lion King being the main one. And I was involved from day one with that, with the writers of the book before we knew Elton was going to join.
Right.
So in that case, and obviously we knew there were only going to be five songs or 6 songs in the film. And the plot my lyrics, wherever they came in the show, had to advance to a certain extent, advance the plot. Or certainly advance the characters. So that was important in that case. But otherwise, I've tended not to work with a book, not even with chess. But obviously, you discuss the book with your fellow writers. Things like chess or Evita, there is a book. It was basically mine. I mean, I got a Tony for the book of Evita, and I thought, this is a bit weird. There's no book. And then I thought, well, hang on, there is a book. That's the story. So I feel I earned that Tony by writing or by constructing a tolerably competent story. Does
it alter the lyrics, though, in the way that you're working? Because, so I write a lot about dance, and obviously it very much alters dance, I think, whether the music is there and they're or whether
it does. I mean,
how does it work with you, with a lyricist?
Well, if you've got a tune to work to, and obviously having, as I said before, having agreed the basic plot, what it's going to say, then a good tune will inspire and also make you concise, because you've got to say something in 9 syllables, which is nearly always better than saying it in 9 words or 9 sentences. But if you've got the lyrics first, you've got great freedom.
Right.
So if the rhyming pattern doesn't work for you, and because obviously once you've written verse 1, then verse 2, 3, and 4 have to have the same structure. And in some cases, the odd line the same, especially if it's the title line. But you can always alter it. If you find, you decide to put in a triple rhyme or something insane, and you can't find the triple rhyme, you can always boot the structure of the song around, which you can't do if you've already got a tune.
Right.
So there are differences. The danger with writing lyrics first, you've got that freedom. You can do what you want. On the other hand, the danger is you get too waffly and go on for too long. You're not concise. Whereas with a tune first, then the lyricist has to be fairly concise or very concise.
And have you ever written a lyric to order? I mean, has Andrew or Elton John or somebody said, I need some more lyrics here because I've got this idea in my head?
To a certain extent, I suppose that's happened. In case of Andrew, he would sometimes say, involved with the show, he might say, well, I think we should bring back this melody here. What do you think of that? And that might be the same melody for a different scene. So that would mean new lyrics. But I mean, yes. I mean, it has to be a collaboration between words and music at all stages. So I'm always open to suggestions.
I want you to tell me the story that you told. I think you tell in your show about Elton John and Circle of Life, though. That's what I'm trying
right.
to
well, I don't want to give too much away, but in short, we had a couple of goes at a song for the beginning of the show, which the first thought I had with the scriptwriters and the producers before Elton was involved was to make it a light-hearted opening, and that didn't really work. And we did write a song called "Circle of Life," which was wasn't bad. I mean, great tune, but it wasn't suitable, and it was, without being thigh-slappingly funny, it was light-hearted rather than the eventual Circle of Life, and it just didn't work. So one was then forced to have another go. Well, I wanted to have another go. And Elton was in town. I mean, the thing about working with Elton, which is both a plus and a minus, is he's never around, and B, he's never around. So you have to get hold of him. But he writes on the road, but he was in London, and he said, look, this new Circle of Life, when you got the lyrics, if you can do them now or soon, because I'm coming into London on Thursday, or I'm going to be in the studio on Thursday. And I said, okay, I'll get them to you by Tuesday. And he said, nah, just bring it on Thursday. It's fine. I thought, okay, I've got 2 more days. So, I mean, I had been working on them, and this was the more serious version of the Circle of Life. And I took them along to the studio as requested. And he was already there playing around with some themes. And I gave him the lyric, and he seemed to like it. And he began singing along. And I wish I'd had a recording of the entire hour and a half. But it just, gradually the great tune that we all know and love evolved. And at one point he said, I need another line. Not referring to drugs, of course. And he said, I need another line, which he hardly ever asks for. He's one of the great composers, one of the best to work with, because he's always happy with the lyrics. He hardly ever says, oh, I don't like that. A lot of composers say, oh, I think I've got a better idea for that. And the answer is, no, you haven't. But Elton, he said, and it was in the bit where it goes, with the faith, hope, love, and all that, nicked from 1 Corinthians 13. And I just said, on the path unwinding, which sounded like a nice phrase, and it worked. And it really made the whole end of the song work. I mean, it worked anyway, but I mean, just adding that one more phrase, because it was that wonderful build up towards a circle of light. And so it was a song literally written and then recorded. The demo was recorded 20 seconds after it was written. And that was a particularly exciting moment. I mean, to actually see Elton working on a song.
And a song that's become such a classic as well. I mean,
it worked well. I mean, it was perfect for the opening of the film and indeed for the show, the theatre show.
Do you have, I know you're not allowed to have, not allowed to have favourites. I know it's a question that people always ask, and it's slightly invidious. But do you have a favourite lyric that you think has been undervalued? Do you have things that you think, I was really proud of that and nobody ever really got it?
I'm sure there's quite a few. Yes, it's interesting. I think people, pay a bit more attention to my lyrics now than they used to. If it's funny, it's nice when they laugh. I get the odd letter, some very odd, from people who say, I really think this is a very interesting line. Did you mean this? And I always try and answer it. But I think a lot of it is, I mean, obviously, there are places where I think, well, there's 2 meanings here. But I think you've got to be pretty direct with lyrics, especially in theatre. I think if you're too clever and too obscure, then people don't get the overall message. I mean, Can You Feel Love Tonight's a pretty straightforward thought, but it works. And I always like the line about kings and vagabonds. I'm not quite sure where that came from, but it's a nice line and it works. And it means, doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor or whatever. And I don't know where I got that from. I probably got that from some childhood hymn or something, an awful lot of stuff. If I think about it, I can relate back to when I was about 9.
It's interesting that, isn't it? You talked recently about that a slight hope that surtitles might be used more in musical theatre to help people actually hear the lyrics. I mean,
Well, yes. I mean, I've seen it so often in opera, either as a translation or even as an actual, showing you what the lyric actually is. And I find it a great help if I don't know. It's quite hard to hear all the words, not because you're deaf, but because, words are often get lost or drowned out by some trumpet or something. And if it's a choral number, it's particularly hard to hear. If you've got more than about 3 voices singing something, you might as well, read a book. When we did Chess at the Albert Hall a few years ago, I managed to get the director, Hugh Waldridge, did a very good job. He was quite happy to agree to subtitles on a couple of scenes because there's a song in Chess called Murano, which opens up the show. And I think nobody gets Murano because you can't hear what they're saying. And it's quite funny, and it makes a point about this is not the musical you think you're going to get. And it's interrupted at the end of the song by heavy rock guitar, which, it sounds a bit pretentious, but sort of symbolizes a rock musical taking over from what might have been a corny musical. I think Murano is a great song and a lovely tune from Benny, but it could have fitted into The Sound of Music, and that's deliberate. But nobody got it unless you followed the record avidly. But when we stuck the words up on a big screen at the Albert Hall, it got laughs and a big round of applause at the end. It never got that in the theatre because people thought, well, yeah, it's all right, but what's it all about, Alfie? And then they got another, reporters all harassing Freddie, the American chess player, and a lot of that was hard to catch. And it took quite a long time before anybody watching the show who didn't know the record had a clue what was going on. And if there had been subtitles, they would have got it pretty quick. I remember sitting through the Ring cycle, and without subtitles, I wouldn't have had a clue what was going on. Admittedly, it was in German.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is the interesting analogy, because English National Opera is singing in English.
Yep.
80s or whatever, or 90s, I think, decided to introduce subtitles anyway, because it did help people actually follow plot.
I saw a modern opera recently at the Royal Opera House. I've now forgotten its title. Obviously, made a great impression on me. But that was in English. It was called Festum.
Festum, yeah.
It had subtitles or surtitles, and that made a hell of a difference because otherwise I would not have had a clue what was going on. Maybe I was just particularly stupid, and it doesn't. I think directors worry about it because they think, my God, that the audience will take their eyes off my brilliant direction. And no, we won't. And it's something I wouldn't say that every show needs, and certainly a show that's really well known, like Oliver or Sound of Music, or dare I say it, Jesus Christ Superstar, probably doesn't need it because everybody knows the words anyway. But then, there's foreign people there, people who may not speak English or may only, actually, if the subtitles are in English, I wouldn't help them either. But you know what I mean? It's, it makes it clearer, I think, for people. Yeah.
Actually, it does sometimes help because sometimes if I see a show in French, it helps me having French. My ear for French is less good than reading it. I can still do better with it. But
yes.
What about you on amplification as well? Because I would say that one of the other things that has altered since you started out is that shows are more amplified now. And amplification has at some levels got better, but it has at other levels got louder.
Yes, I like loud music, I think. I mean, being a bit of an old rocker at heart. And if you've got a rock or thumping number and it's not amplified, it can sound a bit strange sometimes. But if the miking is very sophisticated, and it usually is these days, then I don't see much harm in it, as long as it doesn't sound like it's coming through a bad car radio or something. But no, I'm not anti-amplification at all. In fact, I'm pretty pro it, really. Superstar would never have taken off if it had just been sung. I mean, we had a lot of trouble with it on Broadway because the technology was a bit primitive. But Superstar depended on having a thumping great bass and drums and a lead guitar and a good rock singer, as does Chess as well. But they incorporate, both even Superstar back in the 70s and Chess certainly, they incorporate conventional orchestrations as well, and conventional ballad singing at times.
Yeah, and that's a great thing, really.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense that, you have devoted essentially a career to musical theatre. I know you've had some pop it.
So far.
So far, right. So the number ones are coming up.
I'm thinking of moving to Formula One.
Do you feel that musical theatre is sort of undervalued, really, as a form?
No. I think a good show is, still valued enormously. Sometimes a bad show is really overvalued. I don't know how people think that one's really good, but that might just me being vicious. No, I don't think it is. I think if you would see far more musicals than I do. But it was a great, I was so happy to see a really good musical, like maybe Happy Ending. It uplifts you if it's good, but most musicals are, most of them are quite good, have got something to offer, but the really good ones that make you go, wow, they're quite rare. And I don't think the musicals as a whole are overvalued.
What would your favourite musical be that wasn't written by you? What are the ones you go?
Probably My Fair Lady. I thought the score of Hair was brilliant. What else? Oliver. Obvious one. Sound of Music, Oklahoma, South Pacific, Carousel, King and I. Salad Days, even going way back. These are all old ones that I grew up on. I'm trying to think of really good modern ones. I mean, Hamilton, of course. I thought Hamilton was great. One nearly always says shows that are obviously good because they're obviously good, and generally speaking, unless they depend on a gimmick, they will run because they're good. And I've always liked, genuinely. It's like when I was at school, I preferred Elvis Presley to modern jazz. I now actually rather like a lot of modern jazz, especially the stuff that was around when I was at school, which the intellectuals at school liked. They would say, oh, Jerry Mulligan, Miles Davis, fantastic. It was Elvis and Cliff and the Shadows. Oh. But actually, I genuinely liked Elvis and Cliff more than I liked Miles Davis at the time.
Yeah.
I still do in many ways. And I think I've always had a commercial ear because I genuinely like stuff that most people like, which helps.
And sometimes I think the subtlety of what you do as in musicals gets lost. And because it is a commercial form, because people do like it. And I remember hearing you talk about Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, and saying that what everybody always misses is that the critics, I think, at the time talked about it being cliched sentiment, and you
said it's meant to be. Yeah, I think that's true. It was meant to be a string of cliches. It was a political speech, which sounds terrifically sincere because it's got nice words and a beautiful tune. But actually, she's like most politicians. I think there's a wonderful track by Peter Sellers, a political speech on Songs for Swinging Sellers. It was a spoken thing, and it was a string of cliches, and it was very funny. But of course, he said nothing. And a lot of political speeches are, today as much as any other time in the past, and from people who are basically, decent politicians, like, we have a few of those in this country, as opposed to manic dictators. They often talk in appalling cliches. When you think, would you say this normally, round a dinner table or something. But that's what the speech is. But I remember some critics saying this, Don't Cry for Me, Argentina is just a string of cliches. And I thought, therefore it's crap. But my argument was, it's a string of cliches and you've spotted it without realizing it's brilliant. But also it worked. I mean, the thing is, it kind of proved my point by being a mega hit because it does sound sincere when it's sung beautifully by Julie Covington or Elaine Page. And the tune is so good, it's very hard not to be captivated. And one of the things I learned from this show I've just been doing, and I'm about to do again, hurry for tickets, is Shona Daly, who's a great West End singer and a lovely lady. She sings Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, which we had to do in the show. And it comes quite near the end. And she sings it beautifully. And I'm sitting on stage in the shadows slightly because I've done my bit and introduced her. And I remember the first time on the tour with Shona, I thought it's 5 minutes, 22 seconds now. Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. And I've heard it before, but when I heard it sung so well, so close, and I could see the audience reaction, I thought, hang on, this is a good song. And whenever Shona has sung it, which of course is every night now, I always look forward to that, which I never thought I would before. So and in a way, the record and the song has captivated the audience that loves it as Eva Peron did. But then I heard only the other day, some bloke, and it wasn't stupid, it was an interesting remark. He said, people would say, well, why are you crying for Eva Peron? She's doing jolly well. And this chap said, well, he interpreted the song as saying, don't cry for me, because it may look as if I'm going through hell, but I'm not. And therefore the song could be sincere, don't cry for me because now I've achieved this and I was like you and all that. I mean, it's open to different interpretations, as many political speeches are.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So to take you back to your show, where you can get tickets, I can do your ticket thing, which is sirtimprice.com.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I'm sure it's selling fast. So what's the biggest flops that you talk about as a lyricist in the show? We'll end on
I talk about early versions of songs that became hits, and I mention one or two shows that didn't do all that well. But it's probably more about songs that didn't quite work. But I mean, some of the shows that I worked on aren't featured in the show because there isn't room. But even with a song, even with a show like Blondel or Heathcliff or Starmania, which was a French musical I translated, there's a couple of cracking songs in all of them, and it's usually the story, which is usually my fault. It's usually the story that lets it down. And it's very hard to get a hit song out of a flop musical, however good the song, because not enough people see it, and musicals tend to be, the score understandably tends to be dismissed en masse if the show's a flop, and maybe correctly, but it sounds a bit arrogant, but I haven't really got time to do too many flops. Because
you think about Kansas Morning.
Oh yeah, that's an early version of I Don't Know How to Love Him, which is quite funny, and that goes down pretty well.
Right, and that's that you just completely changed the lyrics.
Well, it was originally written for a pop song, and it was a bad pop lyric when Andrew had this wonderful tune, which became eventually I Don't Know How to Love Him, and it worked with a good lyric. It became a great song. In a way, it's quite satisfying that it flopped as Kansas Morning and then became a mega hit with decent lyrics, because it shows how much a great song needs a lyric. Yeah. Because when it had a crappy lyric, we couldn't get arrested with it. Once it got a decent lyric, it became a hit. So you've got to have both halves of something. It's unusual for a big hit song to have a really bad lyric, because people don't want to hear it, and the definition of what is a bad lyric is, of course, a very personal one. I mean, I think obviously Tutti Frutti by Little Richard starts off "Wop bop baloo balop balop bamboo" is a brilliant lyric because it attracts the attention instantly and it serves the song. If that song had started off "I want to love you and you love me too," it might not have been such a big hit.
Yeah. It's really interesting. It's fascinating. And I'm sure it makes an absolutely wonderful entertainment. I do love those events where people talk about things behind the scenes. I think there's such an appetite for that, of understanding how theatre works, how musicals work. I mean, it's a lovely thing.
Well, I sometimes go on a strange tangent. I mean, I never quite do the same chat each night running. I mean, it's the same songs, just because obviously the singers have to know what's coming up next. But I often go off I think, hang on, why am I talking about this? The answer is the audience are quite interested. But I can, and the singers and the band say, we quite like the fact that we don't know what you're going to say, because we listen, and we have to listen, or else we don't know when we're coming on. And I say, well, I don't know what I'm going to say, so how the hell can you know what I'm going to say?
True definition of live theatre.
Yeah, exactly.
And live podcasting too. So thank you so much, Tim, for coming to talk.
Thank you.
Nice talking.
Thank you for your great interest. It's fun.
Yeah, it is lovely, and I should look forward to it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah.
And that's it from this episode of the What's on Stage podcast. And a reminder to sign up wherever you get your podcasts normally.